Hey everyone, welcome back to Tallulah Talks. Today is not a Saturday, it is Sunday. I wasn't able to upload yesterday because I was quite busy, so yesterday's video is now today's video. If you do hear noise in the background, it is my bird. I unfortunately can't do anything about that. I don't have any other room to record this. So today we're actually going to be looking into what is believed to be the most haunted building in England, known as the Borley Rectory. Now, I hadn't really heard of this. I kind of went through some podcasts for ideas about what to do for this week's paranormal video. And I came upon this one about the Borley Rectory and how, like, even after 80 years of the building being torn down, it is still said to be very much haunted. So without further ado, we're going to get into it with the book of stories. So like I've just said, it was known as the most haunted building in England, and it was built in 1863 for Reverend Henry Bull. So there were kind of many claims of ghostly activity from as early as 1819. So it must have been like the grounds or something that were haunted if it was as early as 1819, because like I said, the rectory itself was built for the Reverend. People would claim to see a shadowy nun figure, and she could be seen gliding along the grounds where the rectory was actually built. When Reverend Bull and his family moved in, there were reports of like water and gushing sounds coming from within the building, not out with, like within the building, and they wouldn't have had like plumbing or anything at that time, so it was kind of weird that this was happening. And again, this wasn't linked to any main system because at that time there wouldn't have been indoor plumbing, and bells would also ring. Even after the wires were cut, the bells would still ring. There were claims of disembodied sounds of crashing and heavy footsteps, and much of the activity was actually centred around Henry Bull's daughters, specifically Ethel. Many of the doors within the building were targeted by what was said to be invisible hands, and there was actually once where I don't know whose face it was, but they were apparently slapped very hard by an invisible hand. Ethel's nursemaid had fled after just 2 weeks on the job, claiming to be terrorised by footsteps just outside her door. Oh, sorry, there was a bit of hair on there. However, the Bull family did refuse to leave the home, even though they were terrorised probably every day by whatever this was. They point blank refused to leave. They shouldn't have had to leave because it was their home. In 1892, Reverend Bull actually died, and his son Henry Jr. took over his duties. One day while in the garden with the dog, Henry Jr. saw legs behind the trees in the orchard. So being Henry, he went to investigate. What? He actually saw the legs move along the foliage, but however, the legs that the body that the legs were attached to was reportedly headless, according to Henry Jr. and other witnesses as well. Henry Jr. also claimed to see a carriage being pulled by 2 horses and again driven by a headless man on more than one occasion. In 1900, Henry's sisters Ethel and Frida had come home after a summer party, and they had claimed to see this wandering nun, and she was actually seen quite often, just gliding through the trees in the orchard. The younger sister Elsie had kind of run to see like who this person was, because obviously she believed it to be a real person, and as Ethel and Frida had kind of run after Elsie, they actually saw the nun dissolve right in front of their eyes as Elsie had kind of reached where the nun was standing. There weren't just the family as witnesses, there were also people out with the family that witnessed these events. There was a travelling handyman named Fred Cartwright, and he saw the nun a total of 4 times in the space of like 2 weeks, but he again believed this nun to be a real living person. But this was until the 4th sighting, where I think he was obviously just following the nun with his eyes or whatever, and she just completely disappeared as he watched. So the second Reverend Bull, Henry Jr., died in 1927, and his replacement was Reverend Guy Smith and his wife Mabel. So I guess when the second Henry Bull died, the whole family just moved out of the rectory. Mrs. Smith was horrified as she basically found a small paper bag as she was cleaning out some cupboards, and it had a human skull within it. The husband buried the skull in the churchyard, obviously out of respect, and over the months of living there, the whole family were said to be terrorised by spirits. There was a room known as the Blue Room. I'm not sure if that was just obviously the colour of the room or if there was something more to it, but in the Blue Room, the family reportedly heard whispering, and this is a quote, "Don't, Carlos, don't." They would hear disembodied footsteps, bells ringing of their own accord. A servant also claimed to see a ghostly coach that was speeding past the rectory twice. And again, remember someone else saw this, the handyman, when he was on the grounds. The family left after only a few months of living there, and contacted the Daily Mirror to ask for help. However, it was more than a year later until another reverend took over, and his name was Lionel Foister, and he then joined the parish. He was encouraged by the remaining Bull family to move into the rectory, just so they would have someone to take over, I guess. And he moved in with his adopted daughter Adelaide, who was 3 at the time, and his wife Marianne. It was said at this time that the activity had gotten a little bit worse. Items would go missing and objects unfamiliar to the family would just kind of show up. Items were also thrown at the family, and at one point one object actually hit Marianne so hard that she did end up having a black eye and a cut face. So we did know that the spirits would occasionally slap people and things like that, but this was kind of a bit more violent than before. Marianne was also said to have been thrown out of bed multiple times, and mysterious messages were said to be written in the walls. I don't think we know what they said. It was never documented. At this point, Reverend Foisters decided to document everything that was going on. Sorry, hair in my mouth. In the rectory, and he then sent this to paranormal investigator Henry Price. At this time, the family did make this decision to leave the rectory due to the Reverend's arthritis. The church ended up giving up, finding someone to take over the duties, and decided to put the building up for sale. However, before a buyer was found, Price was able to rent out the rectory to kind of investigate the paranormal activity, and on May 2nd, 1937, he placed an ad in the Times looking for observers who wanted to see what was going on. So this is the ad. Haunted house responsible persons at leisure and intelligence, intrepid, critical and unbiased, invited to join a rota of observers in this investigation, end quote. Almost 50 individuals gathered together at the rectory, and they kind of logged a number of psychic phenomena that was happening within the rectory. They held a seance on March 27th, 1938, and they reportedly had a message come from the spirit realm, and this actually claimed that the rectory would catch fire in the hallway and the whole building would end up burning down. A nun's body would also be found in the ruins. So when Price's lease ran out, the building was then taken over by architect William Gregson. He bought this building to turn it into a tourist attraction because by this point a lot of people knew about the paranormal activity that was happening within the grounds of the rectory. On February 27th, 1939, while he was unpacking, he accidentally bumped into an oil lamp, and that in turn started a fire in the hallway, which a spirit had said would happen in this seance that they had done. This in turn set the whole building on fire, and the building was reduced to ruins, but reportedly the spirits could still be seen on the grounds. So rather than the building being haunted itself, it was the grounds that were haunted. The nun was seen in an upstairs, or what used to be the upstairs window of the Blue Room, and she was standing on a floor that had been completely destroyed by the fire. Price claimed that he had found, what he believed to be human remains on the grounds, like the spirit had said. However, the church refused to bury these because they believed they were animal bones rather than human bones. Army officers did use this site during the war, and they claimed that they had stones thrown at them and felt a sense of unease whenever they were here. And occupants had decided to rent out the cottage that were also on the grounds, and they reportedly heard voices and laughter of children, and this was in the late 1940s. By the 1960s, any cars travelling to the area would kind of shut down and their headlights would just turn off. And in 2000, when another investigation was taking place, the sound of disembodied footsteps could be heard and the creaking of non-existent doors, because obviously the rectory had burned down. There was reportedly, because they were filming an investigation, and the crew reportedly heard sighs, and many actually believed at this time that the hauntings were actually fake. So Lewis Meerling had a book published in 2000 claiming that the ghost stories were made up because he was a family friend of the original Reverend Henry Bull. Meerling had stayed at the rectory in 1918 and claimed that he saw Reverend Bull taking delight in these spiritual rumours that surrounded the rectory and the grounds of the rectory. The Reverend reportedly owned up to being the invisible hands that would play the piano and that would actually slap members of his family, by the way. And he also claimed that Meerling also claimed that later owners were struggling financially and actually took advantage of these haunting rumours and would then in turn use that to kind of try and make a bit of money. However, there was one mystery that he was unable to explain, and that was in Easter 1935. Investigators and the Foysters had attended a seance and they heard kitchen bells clanging, but the bells were all like the wires were cut and everything. And they also reportedly saw a lightning strike of silver and blue light. To this day, the area is said to still be haunted, though the building no longer stands. And that is kind of all I could find on the haunting of the rectory. And I know it's quite a short video, but obviously because it took place quite a long time ago and it did burn down over 80 years ago, there's not really much more to be said. But apparently tourists who have visited the area have said that they can still hear, like the disembodied footsteps, and people can still see the nun. So although the rectory itself has burned down, the grounds are still said to be very, very haunted. So I have plans for my videos for the next 2 Saturdays, thanks to people on Twitter and here on YouTube. But if this is something you do enjoy hearing about, paranormal cases, definitely hit that subscribe button. I am usually here every Saturday, occasionally a Sunday if I can't do a Saturday, and every Wednesday I am here doing Killer Wednesdays, where I discuss the psychology of killers and serial killers. And I will see you on Wednesday.